night, President Trump delivered his first formal speech to the nation since taking office. No, it was not a State of the Union address, though it did have those vibes, but it was nevertheless important, and we need to talk about it. It was a remarkably long speech, clocking in at almost 2 hours, and it had a lot of the typical pomp and circus that have come to be associated with these kinds of speeches. I used to love a State of the Union address when I was first getting involved in politics. I thought they were so interesting. I would live tweet them. I was hanging on every word. And yes, they always made me angry because they've always been filled with a lot of like flat out lies and spin and PR. But I liked them, I should say, because we were at least talking about policy, which is what I wish we all spent so much more time focused on in our political system versus the bread and circuses we mostly chase around. Anyways, I used to like them. I don't anymore, okay? After working in public policy long enough, you just can't stomach those lies and that spin anymore. Like, I'm just like throwing stuff at my TV like, that's a lie. That's not true. That's not what that bill did. That's not what happened. It literally just spikes my blood pressure. So I didn't even know this was going on last night. I had like tucked in with my husband. We had just got a shipment of wine from Santa Ynez from our trip recently. I had a nice glass. We were getting ready to watch Traders. So I skipped out. I didn't do my job last night. However, I did wake up this morning and, like the hard worker I am, I trudged through this immensely long speech so that you don't have to. And what stood out to me from the speech were 4 truths and 3 lies that we need to discuss. First, I'm Hannah Cox. Welcome to my channel where I bring you my politically homeless takes on politics and culture. Before we jump in today, make sure you like this video if you do like it. Also take a second to subscribe to my channel and make sure you hit that notification bell so you get alerts when I release new videos and never miss an episode. You guys, right from the top of this speech, I felt like I was watching the movie Idiocracy.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of America!
Like, it was supposed to be set, I think, 500,000 years in the future. It feels like right now. These kinds of events, these kinds of speeches used to have a decorum about them. And I have to admit, I am partial to respectability politics. I know that a lot of people have turned on that and they no longer want that. They want to see the other side cry. They want to own them. They want people to get dissed. I don't. I miss the days when both Republicans and Democrats acted like adults who'd been in this kind of space before, acted like people that you would want in charge of a country, acted like people who had basic social graces. Instead, the speech kicked off like this.
We won the popular vote by big numbers and won counties in our country. And won counties in our country, 2,700 to 525, on a map that reads almost completely red for Republican. Now, for the first time in modern history, more Americans believe that our country is headed in the right direction than the wrong direction. In fact, it's an astonishing record, 27-point swing, the most ever.
Like, pause. He didn't say anything incorrect. They did win the popular vote. This is just a hardline fact. You don't have to like it. If you're a Democrat, you shouldn't like it. You should be sitting in a room by yourself and thinking about what you did for the past 4 years to end up in this situation. But why are you protesting? Why is this random rep nobody's ever heard of standing up with his cane, shaking it at the president? Like, I get that you're desperate to get a CNN hit, but oh my gosh, find another way. This is embarrassing. And it actually just escalates from there.
Members are directed to uphold and maintain decorum in the House and to cease any further disruptions. That's your warning. Members are engaging in willful and continuing breach of decorum, and the chair is prepared to direct the Sergeant-at-Arms to restore order to the joint session. Mr. Green, take your seat. Take your seat, sir. Take your seat. Finding that members continue to engage in willful and concerted disruption of proper decorum, the chair now directs the Sergeant-at-Arms to restore order. Remove this gentleman from the chamber.
That's right. We didn't even get 5 minutes into the speech before literal congressmen were being escorted out of the chambers by security. Look, I get that Democrats are flailing in the wind right now. They don't know what to do. They got the air knocked out of them. They are freaking out. They are without a captain. They don't know which direction they're heading. Their attempts to stop Trump have been completely futile. They also don't know how to really galvanize their base because there's so much coming at them. And what they're finding is all of their typical mechanisms that they were using to control the narrative and to push back are no longer working. Their protests look really stupid. Nothing about this projects strength. You look like children. You look like absolute clowns. And by the way, this rep was not the only one that left the chamber. Multiple others also pitched hissy fits.
What did you think of Trump's speech? Not much. My speech is going to be better.
They're all the women are in pink, as if there's some huge war on women, which I have some beef to pick with Republicans about women's issues these days, but I have just as many to pick with the left. Be so serious. These people literally just took a vote yesterday to continue allowing trans women in women's sports, which is just something I've complained about. It's such a minute issue. It's so common sense, not a fair argument. It's not in any way something that is helping trans people either, by the way. It's incurring a lot of backlash towards them. You're getting women hurt. You're taking away women's spaces and their sports. Just stop, knock it off, give up the ghost. But they won't. And then you have other Democrats with their stupid little signs. It's all just so Pollyanna. I cannot. And on top of just how ridiculous they look and how futile these kinds of efforts are in actually pushing back against Trump's agenda, you also have the problem that the things that he is saying while they're protesting make them look really bad. He's not saying anything that really should deserve heckling. He's just repeating facts. The American people did largely vote for Republicans this election. And guess what? Whether you like it or not, the American people in large part like a good percentage of the things the Trump administration has been doing since they took office. Now, I think there's been plenty to push back on, plenty to heckle somebody about, but this was not the moment, okay? This is why they just look so ridiculous, because when you're like the boy who cried wolf and everything's a threat and everything's a catastrophe and everything is undermining your very life, nobody can take you seriously, me included. I don't like Trump. I'm very partial to arguments against some of the stuff that's happening. I have plenty of critiques myself, but they are no longer a trustworthy source when they pitch hissy fits over absolutely anything he does. And Trump even acknowledged that at the top of his speech.
This is my fifth such speech to Congress. And once again, I look at the Democrats in front of me and I realize there is absolutely nothing I can say to make them happy or to make them stand or smile or applaud. Nothing I can do. I could find a cure to the most devastating disease, a disease that would wipe out entire nations, or announce the answers to the greatest economy in history, or the stoppage of crime to the lowest levels ever recorded. And these people sitting right here will not clap, will not stand, and certainly will not cheer for these astronomical achievements. They won't do it, no matter what. Five times I've been up here. It's very sad, and it just shouldn't be this way.
Yikes. Honestly, I find that pretty damning. I think that TDS in either direction indicates you probably don't have a high IQ. And by TDS, I mean people who are just rabidly opposed to absolutely anything Trump does, and also people who are rabidly in favor of absolutely anything Trump does. In fact, if you have that posture towards any politicians, I don't think you're very wise. I don't think you're very astute. As I told you when Trump won, while I have never been a fan of Trump, and I've really never been a fan of any politician, I think there's going to be good things he does, and I think there's going to be bad things that he does. And here on this show and this platform, I'm going to call a spade a spade. I try to be as dispassionate as I can. Obviously, I am always approaching every single issue, every single talking point from a lens of a ideology that is grounded in free market capitalism, individual liberty, and a very small, limited government. Those are the things that I adhere to, and I measure everything else by those standards. And I think by those standards, there have been a number of things that we should applaud Trump for over the past month and a half. So let's get into them. The first truth that Trump said during the speech that I think should be applauded has to do with immigration. And I want to put a huge asterisk here and let you know before I roll it. I'm very pro-immigration. It's one of the things I like least about Trump and his entire agenda. I've been very outspoken about that. I've made huge deep dives into why I think immigration is good and pro-capitalism and pro-individual liberty. But I also think what the Democrats did over the past 4 years is one of the most anti-immigrant agendas I've ever seen. It created so much blowback towards immigration, towards immigrants. It put us 5 steps back in being able to pass good, common sense, pro-immigration reforms. And for those reasons, I actually think what Trump is doing around immigration could work in the favor of my ideology in the long run. Watch.
Within hours of taking the oath of office, I declared a national emergency on our southern border, and I deployed the U.S. military and Border Patrol to repel the invasion of our country. And what a job they've done. As a result, illegal border crossings last month were by far the lowest ever recorded, ever. They heard my words and they chose not to come. Much easier that way.
It is much easier that way. That means fewer deportations, fewer resources of Americans being spent on trying to track these people down. And ultimately, when you do have fewer people trying to come here illegally, it makes sure that the process is more streamlined for those who are doing things the right way, who are already in line to try to come in legally. That's a good thing. I also think when you diminish the overwhelming numbers of people who are coming here illegally, it helps to stop the bleeding. It helps to stop the tide of anti-immigrant sentiment and the belief that many of these people are criminals. I think it's smart policy. He has simply come in and said, you're not going to keep coming here illegally. You're not going to break our laws. You're going to do things the right way. And if you try to circumvent this, there will be pain. There will be separation. There could be apprehension. And so just in having that kind of strong posture, we have seen a change in the attitudes of people and a new respect for our laws. Like I said, I think in the long run, this has to happen in order to move public sentiment back into a space of being pro-immigration and wanting to pass reforms that would ultimately make it easier to come here legally. But because of how crazy and reckless the Democrats have been over the past several years, we have lost so much ground on that front. There's a lot to make up. So this is a truth and a positive out of Trump. The next thing I thought was so exhausting was the less reaction to Trump's statements around gender ideology.
We have removed the poison of critical race theory from our public schools, and I signed an order making it the official policy of the United States government that there are only 2 genders, male and female. I also signed an executive order to ban men from playing in women's sports. And if you really want to see numbers, just take a look at what happened in the women's boxing, weightlifting, track and field, swimming, or cycling, where a male recently finished a long-distance race 5 hours and 14 minutes ahead of a woman for a new record by 5 hours. Broke the record by 5 hours. It's demeaning for women. And it's very bad for our country. We're not going to put up with it any longer.
My question for Democrats on this front is, aren't you tired? I'm tired. I'm exhausted. I am so sick and tired and fed up from this topic completely dominating our political discourse. And it is your fault. You have allowed this to be the case. You have allowed this to become a mega issue on the right. You have empowered this. And I cannot for the life of me figure out why. I say this as somebody who has always been outspokenly pro-trans people, pro-trans people's rights. And I still think the vast majority of Americans share that sentiment. I think if you had a rallying cause around transgender people that was about allowing adults to live in peace, treating them fairly and equally, maybe even creating sport leagues for them, you would have complete or at least dominant cultural support. And at least then the bigots would be we could separate them from the normal rank and file people. But right now what you've done is try to label anybody who's concerned with girls and women's spaces, girls and women's sports, girls and women's rights as a bigot for standing up for those basic values. It's infuriating. They are separate equations, but the fact that you refuse to separate those conversations, I think says a lot about these people. I think that they don't actually care about women's rights. I think they care a lot more about using this issue as a bludgeon against the right. And I don't even really think they care if their terrible advocacy ends up hurting trans people in the crosshairs, which it is. You have lost resoundingly on this issue, as you have on the meritocracy issue. America still largely believes in our founding principles, which are about individualism. They are about meritocracy. They are about individual rights. And the reason the left, I think the only thing that actually makes sense for this complete suicide mission that they're on around gender ideology is because they have let the commie progressive socialists take over their party. And this issue matters a lot to those people. It's a complete hinge of their entire ideology. They need to reduce individualism. They need all people to be equal. They cannot stand the notion that some people have more talent or more looks or more ability than others. They can't stand the idea of male and female having biological differences. They can't stand the notion of the family and the nuclear unit. Their goal is to strip everybody down to try to what? Make everything equitable, not equal, equitable. And so this is part of their whole journey. Their whole goal to destroy individualism is to negate things like biological differences. And I think a lot of people who are well-intentioned, who just don't want to see trans people get bullied, have been completely hoodwinked by this deeper agenda. So that's Trump's second truth. Let's move on to the third, which has to do with Ukraine.
But a lot of things are happening in the Middle East. It's a rough neighborhood, actually. I'm also working tirelessly to end the savage conflict in Ukraine. Millions of Ukrainians and Russians have been needlessly killed or wounded in this horrific and brutal conflict with no end in sight. The United States has sent hundreds of billions of dollars to support Ukraine's defense with no security, with no anything. 2,000 people are being killed every single week, more than that. They're Russian young people. They're Ukrainian young people. They're not Americans, but I want it to stop. Meanwhile, Europe has sadly spent more money buying Russian oil and gas than they have spent on defending Ukraine, by far. Think of that. They've spent more buying Russian oil and gas than they have defending. And we've spent perhaps $350 billion, like taking candy from a baby. That's what happened. And they've spent $100 billion. What a difference that is. And we have an ocean separating us, and they don't. But we're getting along very well with them, and lots of good things are happening. Biden has authorized more money in this fight than Europe has spent, by billions and billions of dollars. It's hard to believe that they wouldn't have stopped it and said at some point, come on, let's equalize. You got to be equal to us. But that didn't happen. Earlier today, I received an important letter from President Zelensky of Ukraine. The letter reads, Ukraine is ready to come to the negotiating table as soon as possible to bring lasting peace closer. Nobody wants peace more than the Ukrainians, he said. My team and I stand ready to work under President Trump's strong leadership.
There are three main reasons that Trump won so handedly this past election. And they are, of course, the economy, which we'll get to in just a second. And I would wrap immigration up in that, actually. They have to do with blowback towards the COVID censorious regime of the Biden administration. And they have to do with war. The Democrats, for some godforsaken reason, have decided to become the party of war. The Republicans finally kicked all of the neocon hacks, the McCains, the Romneys, the Cheneys out of their party. And instead of letting them go off into the sunset, hopefully into a fiery sunset, instead the Democrats were like, hey, why don't you come on over here and join our bench? Like, what in the actual crap, you freaking lunatics? You guys thought these people were Hitler when I was in high school, and you were actually closer to them being Hitler than you are to Trump. Like, it makes absolutely no godforsaken sense that you did this. It makes me infuriated. Why? Why would you allow this to happen to your movement? Why did you decide to become the pro-war party? It's disgusting. It is hideous, and it is insanity. What has been going on with Ukraine and Russia under Biden, it's completely unhinged. And I shouldn't even say Biden, because I truly do think that he was a checked out old man puppet for the majority of his tenure. I think he sucked long before he became president, but I actually blame all of the other people working in the federal government during his administration more for what transpired during that time period than I do him. Those are the people that have been running the show for decades and decades. That's why you hear the screeching and the gnashing of teeth about these people being fired, because they have been able to call the shots behind the scenes, and that is coming to an end, thank God. What Trump has done in his posture towards Ukraine and Russia is unquestionably correct. I actually loved that moment in the White House on Friday. I didn't get to cover it because I was out that day, but I loved him checking Zelensky and putting him in his place and just saying common sense to his face. You don't have the cards. You don't have the ability to win this war. You have to come to the table. You have to negotiate. This is ridiculous, and you are getting people killed, and you don't care. You don't care. And we are not going to keep bleeding our country dry to support your delusional belief that you can win this war. He simply can't. And so because Trump strong-armed him, he's now willing to come to the table, and hopefully this utterly disgusting conflict will come to an end very soon. I have to applaud Trump and his administration for this. I mean, standing ovation. They are so right to check Europe and the people who have grifted and leached off of the United States, all while hating us. These people hate us. Europe hates America. They literally look down their noses at us all the time. They're super commie socialists. Their countries are going to crap, and yet we allow them to come in and make us pay their bills for their military defense. It's stupid. It makes no sense. They can pick up the pieces for this. We're out. I love to see it. And Democrats, for the love of God, if you don't understand why you are so desperately wrong on this conflict, please log off and go do some research. Take some time to actually understand the past decades worth of events that led up to this moment. Take some time to understand why the special interests on your side have been so in favor of keeping this conflict going. Learn to look deeper. You've gotten played. All right, the last of Trump's truth has to do with the economy. Let's roll this clip.
Upon taking office, I imposed an immediate freeze on all federal hiring, a freeze on all new federal regulations, and a freeze on all foreign aid. Among my very highest priorities is to rescue our economy and get dramatic and immediate relief to working families. As you know, we inherited from the last administration an economic catastrophe and an inflation nightmare. Their policies drove up energy prices, pushed up grocery costs, and drove the necessities of life out of reach for millions and millions of Americans. They've never had anything like it. We suffered the worst inflation in 48 years, but perhaps even in the history of our country. They're not sure. As president, I'm fighting every day to reverse this damage and make America affordable again. A major focus of our fight to defeat inflation is rapidly reducing the cost of energy. The previous administration cut the number of new oil and gas leases by 95%, slowed pipeline construction to a halt, and closed more than 100 power plants. We are opening up many of those power plants right now. As you've heard me say many times, we have more liquid gold under our feet than any nation on earth, and by far. And now I fully authorize the most talented team ever assembled to go and get it. It's called Drill, Baby, Drill.
Just in case you thought it was like a Democratic grift in order to try to gaslight people under the Biden administration to make people like them more, or to try to win the next election, it turns out it's not. They truly believed all of their own hot air about Biden's economy, which is mind-numbingly stupid. It is an atrocious economy. Biden did so many stupid anti-American things during that 4-year time period. People were so desperate for economic relief that they literally voted Trump back into office, and yet Democrats still will not or cannot acknowledge it. And I think part of it is because most of them are actually economically illiterate. I truly do think that that's true. I also think a lot of them can't think for themselves. And I'm including party leadership in this. I'm including people actually in office when I say the Democrats. They can't think for themselves. They literally just get a party line and it trickles down and they all just repeat it. This actually showed up in a video this week, somebody pointed out, where, I think over a dozen of them were caught making pretty much the exact same video with the exact same talking points about Trump.
When I win, I will immediately bring prices down starting on day one.
Not true. That's
And that's what you see happening with this economy rhetoric. They are still in such deep denial.
Parts of it were simply
forgive me, a parallel universe of things that are simply not true. He said he inherited a catastrophe from Joe Biden economically. He inherited the strongest economy in the world.
I guess I should label this a half-truth because there's multiple things going on here. First and foremost, Trump was never amazing on the economy in his first term. And the only reason people think that he was is because most Americans are also economically illiterate because the government runs our schools and it doesn't teach people financial or economic literacy. But Trump's first term was really saved economically by his agenda on regulations. This is where he was completely unfailingly good. And it seems like he's going to keep that same posture in this administration. That's encouraging. Just letting the economy breathe, just getting the boot off the neck of free market capitalism is enough to subset all the other terrible things he intends to do on the economy. And that was true the first term too. He spent us into oblivion. He did a lot of really foolish things. He definitely has some blame for the inflation that we live with under Biden because of that. But his regulations and his tax cutting agenda during the first term were enough to offset that and give people the perception that he was very good economically. I told a lot of people who asked me personally who they should vote for when it came to this election, who were telling me their top concerns were the economy and war, that on the economy, I thought Trump was a mixed bag. And I still very much believe that. But on the things he's bringing up, these are very, very good things. The deregulation agenda, the pro-energy agenda, letting America's economy take off. This is a very good thing for us. And the fact that Democrats refuse to acknowledge that and refuse to care about this very real pressing issue that matters the most to Americans and matters even more to the poor Americans they claim to represent, I think is beyond arrogant. I think it is obtuse. I think it is selfish, and I think it is ruinous. But I'll pause here before I get into the set of lies from Trump that I want to address. I'm curious what your thoughts were. What were your takeaways? Were these the things that stood out to you? Were there other moments that I am not touching on here? Leave me a comment. Let me know your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel while you're doing it. So on to the lies. We'll start off with the one that centers around the economy. And of course, it's the big elephant in the room, which is Trump's tariff agenda, which pretty much is the only thing economists agree on. A lot of Americans tend to have this perception that all economists are like of the same school of thought, which is not true, which is why you can have a lot of really stupid experts in economics giving you information that is totally false.
Democrats need to grow a spine.
But whether they come from far left schools of thought, whether they come from like Keynes' school of thought, which is what has mostly governed America for the past couple of decades, or whether they are like me and are in the correct school of thought, which is the Austrian school of economics, the one thing economists across the political divide tend to agree on is that tariffs are bad and not good for an economy, and that ultimately citizens pay for them. Trump does not care, though, and is moving full steam ahead with this tariff agenda. And yes, we already are seeing the terrible repercussions of that.
Stories like Jeff's remind us that tariffs are not just about protecting American jobs. They're about protecting the soul of our country. Tariffs are about making America rich again and making America great again, and it's happening, and it will happen rather quickly. There'll be a little disturbance, but we're okay with that. It won't be much. No, you're not. Oh.
Trump is not wrong that we need more things to be made in the US. That is a national security question. That is also an economic question. But the way you make that happen is not tariffs, which again, actually just make it harder for things to be made in the US. Because guess what? It's more expensive for the companies to build things. It's harder for them to access the materials that they need. And then all of those costs get passed on to the American people. So it doesn't do anything to ensure that more things are made here. What would do that is to deregulate, to get government out of the market, to make it cheaper to employ people here, and as a whole, just get government out of the equation. The market can handle this. It's government that has forced so much production overseas. So that's the first big lie from Trump. The second has to do with free speech.
And I have stopped all government censorship and brought back free speech in America. It's back.
Guys, free speech is not so back under Trump. Republicans have been pretty egregious on this front for the past decade as well. I mean, they're not as bad as the Democrats, but it's just because they haven't been in power. At the state level, they've also been trying to pass a lot of censorious bills. Many members of Congress have been partnering with Democrats to try to pass all kinds of disgusting anti-tech, anti-free speech bills, trying to get control of the internet, trying to give the FTC control of the internet. I'm talking about people like Marsha Blackburn and Josh Hawley, and Trump Trump himself and JD Vance too have spearheaded a lot of these conversations. Even just this week on Truth Social, Trump was basically threatening to criminalize college students for protesting things he likes. Here is his post where he said all federal funding will stop for any college, school, or university that allows illegal protest. Agitators will be imprisoned or permanently sent back to the country from which they came. American students will be permanently expelled or, depending on the crime, arrested. No mask. Thank you for your attention to this matter. FIRE, which is the best free speech organization out there, quote tweeted him and said, free speech on college campuses is a proud American tradition and on public campuses protected by the First Amendment. President Trump's message this morning, combined with other recent executive orders threatening punishment for protected speech, is deeply chilling. Yes, it is. Not cool, bro. All right, on to the last lie from Trump. This one had to do with criminal justice.
We're also once again giving our police officers the support, protection, and respect they so dearly deserve. They have to get it. They have such a hard, dangerous job, but we're going to make it less dangerous. The problem is the bad guys don't respect the law, but they're starting to respect it, and they soon will respect it. I've already signed an executive order requiring a mandatory death penalty for anyone who murders a police officer, and tonight I'm asking Congress to pass that policy into permanent law.
I'm going to hold Republicans' hands when I say this, but being a police officer is not a dangerous job. Not even close. In fact, it's not even ranked within the top 10 most dangerous jobs in this country. It's actually a pretty relatively safe job because police aren't doing all that much to put themselves in danger. They're mostly running around and locking up people for peacefully smoking marijuana. They solve very few violent crimes. They're very rarely involved in violent incidents whatsoever. In fact, I'd say, looking at their rates of domestic abuse, they're as much of a threat as anybody out there. And it is excessively rare for them to die in the line of duty. That all being said, this whole mandatory death penalty for anybody who kills a cop is something I'm intimately familiar with as somebody who overturned the death penalty in 3 states. This is something that proponents of the death penalty frequently try to use as an excuse for keeping this disgusting and idiotic money trap on the books because they know that it has very compelling, sympathetic issues at play. Obviously, people believe that police are risking their lives and putting themselves in danger to protect them every single day. And so they are impassioned to make sure that they are protected in those roles. And the thing is, the death penalty doesn't do any of that, but it feels good to people. The death penalty has absolutely no impact on public safety or a person's decision on whether or not they are going to commit a crime. And that's as much true in states that have a mandatory DP for police officers as it is anywhere else. And if you compare the actual data around deaths for police officers in those states versus others, guess what? Doesn't make them any safer. All it is something that is going to suck up millions of dollars, not make anybody safer, and probably kill innocent people in the process. So I just think this is abysmally stupid. Trump has a very, very boomer, outdated mentality around the death penalty that is dying out in this country. And I do think once the boomers are gone, you will see the little remnants that are left of it disappear because it is every argument's against it. When you actually know what you're talking about, you actually do the digging into the death penalty and how it operates, there's just no excuse to keep it operational. And that I say that very dispassionately. I used to be pro-death penalty until I took 5 minutes to research it, and then I realized how stupid it was. So I'll link my video where I do a deep dive on this if you want to actually get in the weeds, but I thought this was just really stupid and mostly virtue signaling BS. Now, where I want to wrap is where Trump wrapped, because I'm not going to lie. I teared up at the end of his speech. His speechwriters, they nailed this.
From the patriots of Lexington and Concord to the heroes of Gettysburg and Normandy, from the warriors who crossed the Delaware to the trailblazers who climbed the Rockies, and from the legends who soared at Kitty Hawk to the astronauts who touched the moon, Americans have always been the people who defied all odds, transcended all dangers, made the most extraordinary sacrifices, and did whatever it took to defend our children, our country, and our freedom. And as we have seen in this chamber tonight, that same strength, faith, love, and spirit is still alive and thriving in the hearts of the American people. Despite the best efforts of those who would try to censor us, silence us, break us, destroy us, Americans are today a proud, free, sovereign, and independent nation that will always be free, and we will fight for it till death. We will never let anything happen to our beloved country, because we are a country of doers, dreamers, fighters, and survivors. Our ancestors crossed a vast ocean strode into the unknown wilderness and carved their fortunes from the rock and soil of a perilous and very dangerous frontier. They chased our destiny across a boundless continent. They built the railroads, laid the highways, and graced the world with American marvels like the Empire State Building, the mighty Hoover Dam, and the towering Golden Gate Bridge. They lit the world with electricity, broke free of the force of gravity, fired up the engines of American industry, vanquished the communists, fascists, and Marxists all over the world, and gave us countless modern wonders sculptured out of iron, glass, and steel. We stand on the shoulders of these pioneers who won and built the modern age, these workers who poured their sweat into the skylines of our cities, these warriors who shed their blood on fields of battle and gave everything they had for our rights and for our freedom. Now it is our time to take up the righteous cause of American liberty. And it is our turn to take America's destiny into our own hands and begin the most thrilling days in the history of our country. This will be our greatest era. With God's help, over the next 4 years, we are going to lead this nation even higher, and we are going to forge the freest, most advanced, most dynamic, and most dominant civilization ever to exist on the face of this earth. We are going to create the highest quality of life, build the safest and wealthiest and healthiest and most vital communities anywhere in the world. We are going to conquer the vast frontiers of science, and we are going to lead humanity into space and plant the American flag on the planet Mars and even far beyond. And through it all, we are going to rediscover the unstoppable power of the American spirit. And we are going to renew unlimited promise of the American dream. Every single day, we will stand up and we will fight, fight, fight for the country our citizens believe in and for the country our people deserve. My fellow Americans, get ready for an incredible future, because the golden age of America has only just begun. It will be like nothing that has ever been seen before. Thank you, God bless you, and God bless America.
Americans want to believe in American exceptionalism, and so do I. And I think that that hope has been so dashed over the past couple of decades. We have been so disappointed in our government and in our country in so many ways. So many things have come to light in the age of information. And I still feel a lot of pessimism about our ability to turn that ship around. But I think what's important to recognize, while I think misguided in many ways, the bulk of the people who are behind Trump and who support him are doing so because they believe a few things about him. They believe he actually loves this country. They believe he is truly fighting for them as individuals and also for the ideals that this country was founded upon. They believe he is actually fighting back against the people who hate this country and who want to undo our Constitution and undo those foundations that we were built upon. And for that reason, they see him as a hero. And I think he believes that about himself too. Again, for me, votes out. I think I'm more likely to have more I disagree with him on than that I think is positive. But I can think that while also believing somebody's motivations and intentions are pure, and that they at least believe that they are trying to do the right thing. And I think that the thing that should be able to bring Americans together, and that right now it doesn't feel like is happening, because it doesn't feel like the left agrees on these things, to me, in large part. I mean, just listening to the conversations at hand and just seeing the reactions to speeches like this, I feel like the right still does believe in these values and is at the very least trying to have hope in the future that they can be restored and that we can live up to our ideals, whereas it feels oftentimes the majority of the left is not even on board with that agenda. And I think that ultimately, along with a series of policies they need to examine, but that sentiment, that belief, that goal has to shift on the left if they want to be a viable national movement moving forward. All right, guys, I'll wrap it there. I do have a little bit of housekeeping briefly. You may have noticed my schedule's been a bit off. I've been having to take some days here and there. I'm juggling a lot behind the scenes. I do have 2 companies I'm running. And ultimately, while I love making media, I love having these kinds of conversations, my heart is always in public policy and trying to ensure that good things get across the finish line and bad things don't. And right now, we are in the heart of legislative sessions across this country. I'm doing a lot of advocacy, a lot of work on the ground to try to make a difference in many of those fights. And that simply means it is impossible some days for me to do it all and to make the show. If you watch me regularly, you know I am a one-woman band here. I am writing everything, filming everything, editing everything, marketing and packaging everything, promoting everything. It is a full-time job in and of itself. And so I'm having to give myself a little grace lately just to make sure nothing falls off the table. I will still be making regular videos, but I will also note that since launching this 5-day-a-week schedule commitment that I voluntarily took on back in October, I do find myself to be a bit drained. I feel like I'm not always taking time to replenish my tank. I'm constantly pouring out and giving my thoughts and giving information I have, but that doesn't give me a lot of time to be pensive, to research, to think things through, to contemplate. And that's really essential in order for my end product to be good. So you probably will notice that I'm not going to be as consistent. There still will be regular videos throughout the week, but if you notice some gaps some days, that's what's going on. And if you want to support the work that I'm doing, and if you want to enable me to be able to do more content while juggling all of this, you can donate to Base Politics, which is the nonprofit I run. You can also subscribe to my YouTube. You can subscribe to subscriber benefits there, and that would really mean a lot to me. So appreciate your support, and I will see you later this week.